Right, how are you? Good to meet you.
You too, you too, you too. I'm just hanging in. Um, Hopefully able to get some coffee soon and go for a walk and pick up some stuff, from a bookstore before another day off of work tomorrow. I've been on vacation for like the past 7 days just
Okay.
in my apartment, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm otherwise chilling.
Good. Yeah, good for
Yeah. So, okay. I mean, I took a listen and a watch. You said you wanted us to kind of just have a journal conversation, about you and the music for, what was it? Some. So yeah, I mean, I guess I want to kind of follow your lead. How do you want to start this thing off? What's your conception of what this is going to look like?
whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to ask me, not necessarily biographical, but unless it comes up organically.
Yeah, right on. That sounds good to me. So I mean, I have a couple of notes I'm just going to pull up on my phone. Um, the first thing that I want to start with, I mean, so you wrote this piece, for this festival. You're going to debut it there. The walls or thin walls, light speed, and private tongues. I guess what I want to just kind of jump in with is what are you trying to convey with this 24-minute kind of universe of sound that you've built out.
Well, I mean, what I had on my mind was one recurring theme in some of the work I do is the thin walls, the proximity between us and other versions of us in the multiverse, and at the same time between communities here on Earth. We're Black communities, white communities, whoever can feel marginalized by other people. How close we are and how separated we are at the same time by very thin structures, ideologically or politically.
So you're, I guess, kind of putting like these sounds then into conversation with one another in some way. Yeah.
I don't know that it's that concrete. In terms of it being attached to that concept, uh, it's fairly loose. I mean, the way, I mean, some people might say that the phrasing is very disjointed and interrupted, and in that sense, yeah, that would be the coming in and out of different ideas or you know energies. It wouldn't necessarily be a continuous stream. It becomes a stream because it occupies the same space, but it's not conceived like that.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, the structure of the thing is, which is fairly typical to modular. I mean, the way I wrote it, what I started off with was actually probably the third section of the first section, the motifs. So I played it differently than I had intended to because I would change my mind every time.
Well, I mean, with that in mind, then there's this. Um, I think about a third of the way through, that first part of this. So about maybe 10 minutes in or so, you have this. To me, it sounds like this kind of groaning throughout, and then there's this, I guess, murmuring, this mumbling, this kind of um, disassociated like conversation or voice that we're not exactly like privy to. Do you know what I'm talking about? Are you familiar exactly with what I'm trying to spell
I,
out right
I think you're talking about the is kind of murmuring but rhythmic at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, can you talk to me a little bit about that? That seemed, like I was on the, again, not to put everything super concrete, but just kind of operating with what I knew. I was like, okay, it seems like there's something on the other side, of a thin wall. My ears pressed up against something, and I'm hearing something going on, but I don't know exactly what that is. And I wanted to know if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, if you read it that way, that's cool with me. Generally speaking, this piece didn't have a lot of words in it, very few.
Mhm.
And that's jumping ahead, but I imagine you couldn't understand them. And I'm also okay with that, which maybe doesn't make much sense, but I've done that with operas also. And the singer is like, I'm not sure everybody understands this. I don't care whether they understand the words or not, actually, ultimately. So
Well, I mean, I guess we can kind of let this conversation, take whatever form it will, and we can whenever we wind up. But that's a very interesting point that you brought up, because if that's the case, then in your opinion, what are those words for? Because towards the end of the piece, you pick up a mic and you start saying something,
Exactly.
into those electronics, and yeah, can you just kind of like maybe not even explain, but just tell us where your head is at when you're kind of like the audience doesn't necessarily need to know exactly what's being said. What's the intent behind that?
Just ultimately the sound rules. So what's happening sonically trumps what's happening, in terms of any lyric content or any, I mean, there are times when I definitely want, not in this piece, but in other pieces, I want the words to be clear. But this case was more, I mean, there was a lot of improvisation in it. And what's in my mind, if you're performing, especially very improvised music with a conscious mind, then you shouldn't even invite anybody to listen to it if you're still at that point. So yeah, I don't know what was on my mind.
So, not to put words into your mouth, but it sounds almost as if like the semantic meaning of those words taking a back seat to like the sound that they produce and how that sound interacts with the other sound that you're producing on these other instruments.
Absolutely. And I mean, hopefully whatever weight the words carry to me will translate sonically and energy wise, whether the audience can understand what I'm saying or not.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I guess it's a fair question, but what would you hope the audience got out of listening to this?
Um, I'm pretty satisfied if people walk away somewhat confused and grappling with it
Okay.
afterwards.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I always hope that it's ritualistic in some way, you know.
Yeah. Let's talk about your setup, if you want to. You said in the notes that it's for a string instrument, you got your guitar and electroacoustic instruments, and so I just kind of see you operating around what I'm assuming is your home studio. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Now, forgive me for not having the exact terminology on deck. I mean, this is a very honest and kind of organic conversation, but in that second, if I can call it a movement, uh, what's up with those bones, man? There seem to be these woody, pieces almost suspended. One is atop a keyboard, and you're producing some interesting sounds with those. Can you kind of go in there a little bit?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have an attraction to those wood sounds. I'm not about to claim it as being original. You're probably familiar with the table music by Thierry Demey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and and actually playing around with that, it always kind of brings back memories of Afternoon of the Georgia Flown by Marion Brown, the opening of it. But yeah, I like the sound of it. I like to process it. That actually, that section, there was supposed to be more wood involved. I had moved it into another room and actually into the basement, and there were a lot more suspended and was instead of being trading off with the keyboards, it was prepared guitar and wood, but it didn't work out because of the locale, because there was too much surface noise under my feet, and like it just visually it was much more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to kind of wander in a little bit of negative space there. I mean, you said that you're attracted to those sounds, and so again, this seems to be a kind of piece of music where for you the most important thing is it seems like you're almost focused like ultimately on timbre, more than anything. So, what sounds would not work for this for you? Um,
For this
what?
particular piece,
Yeah, yeah. What was the absence? What were you like? This sound cannot work for this piece, if anything at all.
oh, uh, very thick analog sound. I should say, a thick pulsing analog sound. A bubbly texture would not have worked for this. Definitely would not have worked for that. And metallic sounds. I mean, a lot of times I work with metal sounds too, and I thought about it and I tried it, but I didn't. Excuse me, I didn't like the way that worked with this.
Wood and metal sounds. You can build a whole modern science center out of those, I guess. I don't know. That was weird. So when I sat and listened to this for the first time, I just kind of saw the notes that you provided kind of in the link to me that you had uploaded. And what I want to know is this a piece that is supposed to be consumed all at once? Is this three pieces kind of rolled into one? How are you separating these movements out? Because it's very clear like where one begins and where one ends, but I guess I wanted to know what your intent was between keeping them all packaged together in one.
If this was performed in a proper venue, it would have been seamless, because just the transition, even through silence and movement, would have been performance oriented enough. But I guess it did seem separated because of that, because I mean, there's an issue with the home concerts, I think, and with this genre in general. I saw this written somewhere about electroacoustic music. Someone said, going to see an electroacoustic performance is kind of like watching someone do a crossword puzzle. And I would, that's an issue with me. And generally, I probably would have, because with the solo work that I've done, which isn't my preference, but especially during the pandemic, that's what's up. I've collaborated with a visual artist, Sandy Pliego. So, it's more multimedia. And that's the way I would have done this live also, if it was in a proper venue.
Well, I mean, that kind of, lets us get into the discussion of like the pandemic that colors pretty much everything that everyone is doing. Did you compose this particular piece of work, I guess, like with that pandemic in mind? Did it kind of, like influence your creative process this time around? Like you said, I mean, if you were doing this in a, a physical, real and present venue, it would be a seamless kind of production, but it's not. And
seamless performance. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems that, you kind of knew, right, that this would be a home effort, right? A home studio production. I just want to know, like, yeah, I guess like if the pandemic had anything at all to do with how you decided to approach creating this.
No.
Cool. And I mean, and I want you to kind of talk a little bit more too, if you will, about your process and what that means for, contemporary music and electroacoustic music, being separated by the thin wall that is a computer screen or a smartphone screen. I guess there is something to be said, right, about watching this kind of performance so removed from both the artist and for the listeners. What do you think about that? Do you think that's having like an impact on your psyche as a creator?
Oh, you mean just the format?
I mean, just the format, the way that the audience is able to listen. I feel that it requires that listening to music, or at least watching these concerts in a pandemic setting, requires an extra level of, audience concentration and communication that I guess we might take for granted in public spaces. There are rules to the game, right? You don't go to a performance and you don't whip your phone out, because it's rude not only to the artist but to the people that may be sitting.
Ideally.
Yeah. But if you're at home, it's like you can throw it on and you can like.
I've witnessed it in the most intimate of concerts. I guess like composers texting while other people are performing.
I mean, like, we can get into the question of, rules for another time. I mean, I have my own feelings on how that works, but I just wonder if for you as a composer, if you think that there's something that you're trying to say that might get, not necessarily you in this particular situation, but in this pandemic listening setup, is there a risk that something might get lost that you're trying to convey?
That's a good question. I mean, and I can only talk about in general, which I mean, everybody could relate to this, whether they're talking about creating music or just whatever their lifestyle is, but the energy levels and the concentration levels are definitely off. It's just a weird time, even though we're doing pretty well with it, but I don't interact with, my colleagues the way I normally would. You don't have the energy to bounce off each other. So even if it was a solo piece and a solo performance, if I was normally going back and forth from working with a trio or a duet situations, that experience still would influence, my general flow throughout the day, from day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute, and creative, because you're composing nonstop. It never stops, ever, not for 1 second. So the fact that we have this weirdness imposed upon us definitely, definitely affects my level. I wouldn't say it's a drop in energy level, but it's a different type of energy and it's a different type of concentration.
Mm-hmm. I just want to
wait for it to end. Like
I want to open the floor to you and just give you kind of a platform to, just to say if there's anything about this particular piece of music for this particular festival that you want listeners to know. Kind of your on the fly oral liner notes for this piece right now, if you feel like it.
Went to the well once too often. I wouldn't offer any oral liner notes. As far as the festival, I was excited to do it, and looking at the programming in general, and not just composers now, but I'm somewhat encouraged by the programming of newer organizations in terms of a broader range of composers and artists. I mean, I think, some people are paying lip service to Black Lives Matter and whatever movement, is in the streets. But I have noticed that I think composers now has been, of course, that's Tanya Leon's thing, so I wouldn't expect anything less of her. But National Sawdust and some other people, I can't, maybe Issue Project, and I just pleasantly surprised that you don't have to search high and low for, a Black composer or Latino composer, or, women, it's just, it is getting better. That's encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I guess I could ask you then, following up on that is, how do you see you in your creative output, right? Where do you find, or where do you feel that fits into a broader struggle or fight or conversation, even?
Broader struggle or fight as far as
I guess, like Black justice, social justice, programming justice, for that matter.
Right? I mean, it depends. I mean, depends on certain pieces are more directed, like an opera I did a few years ago was, more overt in that it was, again, about a multiverse, but also, and this was the year of Ferguson and all of this sort of thing. And it contains samples from the Ferguson riots and of the Black students, saying to Hillary Clinton, you talking about, you talking about. I mean, so that was, very concretely addressing political issues. But even when it's not, standards, I think, permeate, that's, I have this quote, there will always be a little man hidden behind the stove. You know that quote?
No, tell me about that, please.
It's from an essay that Ralph Ellison wrote, and it was a piano teacher um, who said this to him after he had done some not lukewarm, but superficial performance, because he was a trumpet player in school, and he was upset at the response of the faculty. And it's about this, that wherever you are, there is someone unexpected there who will hold you up to a standard, an artistic and performance standard, but it goes beyond that, and saying that your standard should be that, in this case, as a Black person, you don't let the circumstances of what people think you should be connected to define you. Because this piano teacher had what's her name, Hazel, what's her last name, Hazel Harrison. She had, as a Black performer, Black pianist back then, she had, like in the essay, it says there's a signed manuscript from Prokofiev on her piano. So she's telling him, you're carrying Black America with you wherever you go, and you shouldn't let it be narrowly defined by anybody, not Black America or whoever considers themselves broader America. So in that sense, any serious, thoughtful, complete performance, as complete as you can be, carry yourself, is addressing larger issues.
All right. Well, Paul, thank you for chopping it up with me. I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me get an early listen in, and I appreciate your insight on this.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Cool.
So go get some coffee.
I'll do my best.
All right. Oh, but shout out to all the music, arts, and theater educators in New York City and elsewhere.
Absolutely, and thank you for creating. I was just telling a friend yesterday. I mean, 2020 was a year. 2021 is shaping out to be a year. It's been rough for a lot of folks, and when I'm feeling particularly blue, if you will, just listening and reading and consuming Black art, I feel like really kind of gives me a bit of a jolt of energy and inspiration. So thank you for making.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for the interest. All right. Take it easy.
All right. Good talk.